Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that takes the information you have and, well, digs deep to bring you the insights you need.
And this deep dive is specifically for you, the listener. It's built directly from the source material you shared with us.
That's right. You gave us your copy of the COBIT 2019 framework document.
Yeah, and you pointed us specifically towards Chapter 4 and maybe some chatter you've heard around Clause 4.4.
Exactly. And we took a good look, and it seems like what people often mean by Clause 4.4 is really that whole chunk of Chapter 4 covering the Align, Plan, and Organize domain, the APO domain.
Uh-huh. So that's our focus today. We're basically going to take a guided tour through that specific section, APO 01, right through to APO 14.
Our mission really is to unpack this domain, objective by objective, just like it's laid out in your document.
And not just read the definitions, right? We want to explore what these things mean in practice. We'll highlight the key components, the practices, and crucially, how they all kind of hook together to help achieve those bigger enterprise goals you're shooting for.
Think of it like we're walking through this part of the COBIT blueprint together, pointing out the really foundational bits and how they set the stage for, well, pretty much everything else INT does.
Precisely. It's all about getting that alignment right, getting the plan solid before you jump into the building, running, or monitoring phases.
Okay, good plan. So let's get our bearings first. It's Align, Plan, and Organize domain, APO. Where does it actually sit in the, the big COBIT picture?
Okay, yeah. If you look at the COBIT core model, I think it's figure 1.2 in your document, you see that clear split between governance and management.
Right. Governance is the EDM domain. Evaluate, direct, monitor. That's usually the board setting the direction, the oversight piece.
Exactly. And then management, typically led by the CEO, takes that direction and is responsible for the actual planning, building, running, and monitoring needed to execute the strategy and hit the objectives.
And COBIT breaks that management part down into 4 domains.
That's right. You've got BAI build, acquire, and implement, DSS deliver, service, and support, MEA monitor, evaluate, and assess. And then our focus today, APO, align, plan, and organize.
So APO is the core planning domain. It's the plan piece of that management cycle.
You got it. It's fundamentally about making sure the INT strategy lines up properly with the overall enterprise strategy.
Okay, so alignment is key. And it's also about managing resources. People, money, assets, and setting up the right structures and relationships before you get into the thick of building and running things.
Exactly. It's that strategic foundational layer of management.
And what's really helpful about COBIT, as your document shows, is how it breaks down each objective, like the 14 in APO. It's not just a process description.
No, not at all. It details how each objective supports specific enterprise goals and alignment goals. That's figures 3.2 and 3.3.
And then it gets into the specific management practices, their activities, even example metrics, figures 3.4, 3.3 again.
Right. And importantly, it talks about the supporting components you need to make it work.
Ah, the components. Yeah, this is where it feels more practical, beyond just process steps.
Definitely, because to actually do this stuff effectively, you need the right process, yes, but you also need the right organizational structures, the right information flows, people with the right skills.
Guiding principles and policies, a supportive culture.
And sometimes specific services or infrastructure. It's all laid out in figures 3.6 through 3.12. Plus, it points to related guidance, other standards, and details those crucial inputs and outputs for each practice, showing how everything connects. Figure 3.7 covers that.
That whole structure, objective, practices, components, inputs, outputs, goals, gives us a really clear way to tackle this. So let's dive in. APO 01.
Right, APO 01. The title is Managed INT Management, which sounds a bit circular.
Yeah, a bit meta, managing the management.
Exactly, but it's about establishing and maintaining the actual system you use for managing INT within the enterprise. Think of it as like building the engine and the dashboard for the rest of the INT management processes.
So how you structure things, how you measure performance, how you improve the INT management function itself.
Precisely. And a really key practice here is APO 1.01, design the management system. Your source links this directly to alignment goal AG10, ensuring the quality of INT management information.
Okay, so designing the system isn't just admin work. It's about making sure the information coming out of it is reliable for making decisions.
You nailed it. And look at the activities listed. identifying stakeholders, communicating requirements, aligning with enterprise tools like BI systems, agreeing on goal types and metrics, data retention policies.
It sounds like setting up all the basic reporting and measurement capabilities you need.
It really is, and one of the metrics reinforces that. Percent of integration with corporate performance management system. It shows you want INT performance to be visible and comparable right alongside other business performance data.
And the output. Management system design.
Yeah, and that output becomes a key input for designing pretty much all the other processes in APO, BAI, DSS, and MEA. It's truly foundational.
I also see practices in APO Wall 1 about defining organizational structures and roles.
Yeah.
That seems critical too.
Oh, absolutely critical. You've got APO 1.4, define and implement the organizational structures, and APO 1.05, establish roles and responsibilities.
And both of those support alignment goal AG12, having competent and motivated staff.
Right, because having processes isn't enough if you don't know who is supposed to do what.
And APO 1.05 specifically mentions delineating responsibilities and accountabilities, especially for decisions and approvals. That feels like it would prevent a lot of confusion.
It's vital. And check out the inputs feeding into APO 1.05. They're coming from all over the place.
Oh yeah. Like what?
Well, you've got skills info from APO 7, that's human resources, roles related to the quality management system from APO 11, scope details for the information security management system from APO 13,
Yeah, okay.
allocated responsibilities from DSSO 6, business process controls, and even authority levels and guiding principles coming down from governance, EDM 01 and EDM 04.
So defining roles isn't just an HR task tucked away somewhere. It needs input from risk, security, quality, operations, even the board level.
Exactly. That interconnectedness is a huge insight. Something seemingly straightforward, like assigning roles, actually pulls from everywhere to ensure it's complete and lines up with how the whole enterprise works.
That makes a lot of sense. What else is key in APO 1?
Well, there's APO 1.09, define and communicate policies and procedures, which supports AG 11 on compliance. You need the rules, and people need to know them.
And enforcing consequences for noncompliance, I see that listed too.
Yep. And then APO 1.11, ensure framework monitoring and maintenance. This is about continuously assessing performance and feeding that back into improvements. It's the improvement cycle for the management system itself.
Got it. And the components listed for APO Row 1 aren't just about structures and policies.
No, it mentions culture, ethics, and behavior too, emphasizing a common culture around how information is used, security awareness, and having zero tolerance for unethical behaviors.
So it puts the whole management system into a human and ethical context right from the start. Interesting.
Okay, shall we move on to APO 02?
Let's do it. APO 02, Managed Strategy. This sounds like where the aligned part of APO really kicks in.
It really does. Is INT just a service provider, or is it a genuine strategic partner? This objective aims for the latter.
So the goal is defining, communicating, and keeping the INT strategy up to date, making sure it directly supports the overall enterprise strategy.
Exactly. And a critical practice here is APO 02.03. Define target digital capabilities.
Target digital capabilities. Okay, so that's figuring out what the business actually needs IT to be able to do to meet its strategic goals, especially now everything's so digital.
Precisely. And your source shows this practice supports big enterprise goals like quality of products, EG01, and managing digital transformation programs, EG12.
So the activities involve looking at the overall business direction and translating that into specific INT needs, like what services are required considering new tech R&D.
Yes, and potential investment programs. It's about clearly defining that desired future state for INT's capabilities. What do we need to become?
And there's a metric here, percent of enterprise objectives addressed by INT goals objectives. That seems like a direct measure of that strategic alignment.
It is. It's a key performance indicator for this objective. Then you have APO 02.05. Define the strategic plan and roadmap.
Ah, okay. So you've defined the target capabilities. Now this is the plan for how you actually get there.
You got it. This practice involves figuring out the initiatives needed to bridge the gap between where you are now and that target state.
Integrating those initiatives into a coherent INT strategy.
Right, and creating that crucial roadmap, laying out the steps, the timeline, maybe even considering things like training people and managing the change.
This is where the vision becomes actionable. And look at the outputs, INT strategy, and strategic roadmap. Your source lists these as critical inputs to, well, almost every single other management objective across the board. APO, BAI, DSS, MEA.
Yes. That input-output link is arguably the single most important connection showing APO's role in the whole framework.
Well,
It highlights that a well-defined, approved INT strategy isn't just some document sitting on a shelf. It's meant to be the primary driver for all the planning, building, running, and monitoring that follows.
so if your strategy isn't clear, or it's not really aligned with the business.
It just creates confusion and inefficiency everywhere else. Chaos downstream, basically.
Okay, so APO02 isn't just about writing a strategy doc. It's about translating business strategy into IT capability needs, planning the journey, and making sure that plan genuinely drives everything else INT does.
Nailed it. Ready for APO's 03.
Yep. APO03, Managed Enterprise Architecture, the blueprint, as we called it earlier, how tech, data, apps, and business processes all fit together.
Exactly. The purpose is setting up and maintaining that integrated set of architecture models, information, standards, all guiding how you realize the enterprise strategy.
And the first practice, APO 03.01, is define the enterprise architecture context and principles, setting the rules and the vision.
That's it. Activities include really understanding the enterprise strategy that's an input from outside COBIT, creating an architecture vision, where are we now, where do we want to be, and confirming or developing those architecture principles.
The guiding rules for design decisions. Your source mentions TOGAF here, I think.
Yeah, it mentions architectural principles as a key policy component and references TOGAF. These principles act as those essential guardrails for consistency.
Makes sense. Then APO 03.02 is define the baseline and target enterprise architecture, getting into the specifics.
Right. This is where you map out the current state, the baseline, assessing it against your principles and vision. You identify gaps, and then you define the target architecture across all the key layers.
Business, information, data, application, technology, security, all of it.
All of it. Defining the relationships between them. It's creating those detailed maps of here and there.
And the complexity shows up in the inputs needed for this. It's pulling from APO1, organizational structure, data classification.
APO02 for the strategic gap analysis.
APO14 for information architecture models and the business glossary.
And even inputs from the build domain, BAI, like confirmed acceptance criteria or requirements definitions.
So building the architecture isn't done in a silo. It needs input from management structures, strategy, data definitions, even the build processes. It's very collaborative.
Absolutely. And the outputs, the baseline and target architecture descriptions, they then feed into APO 3.03, which is define the architecture implementation and migration plan.
Which logically then points towards the BAI domain, right? Building and implementing based on that plan.
Exactly. And then APO 3.04 is about manage the enterprise architecture. It's not a one-and-done thing. You need governance, compliance reviews, integrating architecture changes with overall INT change management.
So APO 03 provides that essential blueprint layer, ensuring INT development stays consistent and supports the strategy, all guided by those defined principles.
Okay, next up, APO 04, managed innovation.
Ah, this one sounds interesting. Looking for new opportunities.
It is. It's about how INT proactively identifies and evaluates ways to support the enterprise strategy through innovation. Your source highlights APO 4.02, maintain an understanding of the enterprise environment.
And that takes inputs like the enterprise strategy and SWOT analysis.
And outputs innovation opportunities linked to business drivers.
Linked to business drivers. So innovation shouldn't just be random cool ideas. It needs to tie back directly to what the business is actually trying to achieve.
That link is crucial. Then there's APO 04.03, monitor and scan the technology environment, taking inputs like emerging technologies.
Stuff happening outside the company.
Right, and it outputs research analyses on those possibilities, which then feed into BAI 03, managed solutions identification and build.
So scanning the external tech world directly influences how you might build future solutions. It brings outside possibilities into the internal planning.
Exactly. And APO 04.04, evaluate innovation ideas, also outputs evaluations that feed into BAI 03. It's about bringing structure to the innovation pipeline.
And the component section for APO 04 mentions culture again.
Yeah, and specifically building an ecosystem of vendors to help with digital transformation and innovation, continuously scanning for new partners.
So innovation isn't just internal R&D. It involves leveraging external relationships and having the right collaborative culture.
Good point. Okay, ready for APO 05, managed portfolio.
Right. This feels like where the rubber meets the road financially. Taking those strategic ideas and innovation opportunities and turning them into actual investment decisions.
That's exactly it. Deciding which programs, services, and assets to actually invest in to get the best value for the enterprise.
The purpose is evaluating, prioritizing, selecting, optimizing value.
Yep. And APO 0570-1, Evaluate Investment and Services Portfolio, supports key goals around realizing benefits from investments, e.g. 02, AG 03, and managing risk, e.g. 03.
The activities sound quite rigorous, creating and maintaining these portfolios, prioritizing them, even removing programs if they're not delivering the expected benefits or won't achieve them.
It is rigorous, and look at this metric. Percent of INT investments traceable to enterprise strategy. That's a direct measure of whether the portfolio is actually aligned with the business direction, a core theme we keep seeing in APO.
And the inputs. INT strategy from APO 02, business cases from APO CO 5.02. It shows decisions are driven by strategy and value justification.
Right, and the output, prioritization, and ranking of INT initiatives actually feeds back into the strategic plan in APO 02.
Oh, interesting. So evaluating the portfolio helps refine the strategy itself. It's a feedback loop.
It absolutely is. It's dynamic. Then APO 05.02, select programs, is where the actual go decisions happen.
Defining selection criteria, setting up stage gates, those formal review points based on significance, risk, funding.
Getting regular performance reports, reviewing progress towards goals, checking if deliverables are met, if risk is mitigated, and taking corrective action if needed. It's about structured decision-making and ongoing oversight.
It ensures the right programs get picked and stay on track.
And then there's APO 05.05, Managed Benefits Achievement. This takes the program budget and benefits register from BAI 01 as input.
And outputs, corrective actions to improve benefit realization, which feeds up to EDM 02 governance oversight on value delivery.
Exactly. It shows portfolio management isn't just about kicking off projects, it's about actively tracking and ensuring the promised value actually gets delivered, even after the project is technically done.
And the component section specifically calls out benefits management as a required skill, referencing SFIA. That highlights that ensuring value realization needs specific expertise.
Definitely. Okay, following portfolio decisions logically comes APO 06, Managed Budget and Costs.
Can't do much without managing the money, making sure IT finances are handled effectively and transparently.
Couldn't agree more. The purpose is managing the INT budget and costs, providing that clear view, and enabling cost-efficient service delivery. Supports goals like optimizing resource use, e.g. 04, and business process costs, e.g. 09.
APO 06.01, manage the INT budget. This is the allocation piece.
Yep. Ranking initiatives based on those business cases and priorities from APO 05, setting up procedures for budget allocations, actually allocating resources, including external ones, within the agreed budget. It even touches on considering buy versus build or capitalized versus pay-for-use services.
The metrics look at things like resource allocation issues getting escalated and how well resources line up with top priorities.
And then APO 06.03, create and maintain budgets. This takes the investment return expectations from APO 05 as input.
And outputs the actual INT budget.
Right, and that INT budget output, it's another one of those major arteries. It's a critical input back into APO 02 strategy, APO 05 portfolio, APO 7 human resources, and even BAI 03 solutions build.
So financial planning is deeply woven into strategic execution, portfolio choices, staffing, and building new capabilities. It touches everything.
It really does. Then you have APO 06.04, model and allocate costs. This is all about getting transparency.
Defining a costing model, categories, drivers, allocation methods, and making it transparent so users can actually understand their costs, like cost per help desk call, cost per license.
Exactly. That transparency is what enables the fact-based decision-making that's mentioned in the culture component for APO 06. If the business can't see or understand IT costs, how can they make informed choices about what they consume or invest in?
Good point. And APO 6.05, finalized costs, covers the whole cycle. Getting approval, communicating the cost model, collecting actuals versus budget, reporting to budget owners, analyzing variances, comparing to benchmarks.
It's the full financial control loop for INT. The components also emphasize financial management skills, SFIA again, and having a formal budgeting policy, and that culture of transparency on costs and benefits is called out as essential.
Okay, makes sense. Moving on to APO 07, managed human resources.
Right, because plans and budgets are great, but you need people to execute them. The purpose here is simple but vital, providing staff with the required skills and competencies, tied directly to enterprise goal EG10 about staff skills and motivation.
APO 07.01, acquire and maintain adequate and appropriate staffing. Basically, making sure you have enough people with the right backgrounds.
Yes. Evaluating staffing needs regularly based on goals and strategy inputs here are the budget from APO 06 and the strategy from APO 02. Identifying shortfalls or missing skills early in the planning.
And it outputs an inventory of business and IT human resources, which then feeds into program and project planning in BAI.
Correct. So staffing levels are directly tied to the budget you have and the strategic initiatives you've planned. Then APO 07.03 focuses on the quality side. Maintain the skills and competencies of personnel.
Defining required skills, checking if people have them through education, training, experience, maybe certification.
Providing ongoing learning, analyzing skill gaps against what's needed for the strategy.
And the outputs, the skills and competencies matrix and skill development plans feed into defining roles back in APO 01.
Into solutions identification in BAI 03 because you need the right skills to build things.
And even into DSSS 06. Business process controls, ensuring people have the skills needed for specific control tasks.
Exactly. It shows how skill planning impacts role definitions, solution building, and operational controls. The source mentions SFIA again for skilled management guidance.
What about APO 7.05? Plan and track the usage of IT and business human resources.
Right. This takes inputs like budget allocations from APO 6, that HR inventory we just talked about from APO 07.01, and specific resource requirements coming out of program, BAI 01, and project management, BAI 11.
And it outputs resource utilization records and shortfall analyses, which feed back into program management in BAI 01.
So APO 07 connects the strategic needs and budget to actual staffing levels, skill development, and then tracks how those people are actually being used on the approved initiatives. The components mention policies for recruitment, training, outsourcing, and fostering a culture of collaboration and knowledge sharing.
All right, next up is APO 8, Managed Relationships. This sounds important.
Crucial. It's the formal acknowledgement that INT doesn't exist in a bubble. The purpose is establishing and keeping effective relationships going between INT and all its stakeholders, business units, internal users, external partners. Supports key goals like customer satisfaction, EGO 5, and enabling business processes, EGO 8.
APO 8.01, Understand Business Expectations. Feels like step one for any decent relationship.
It absolutely is. Understanding current business issues, their objectives, what they actually expect from INT, and critically, ensuring those requirements are properly understood, managed, communicated, and agreed upon. It takes inputs from enterprise goals and the INT strategy, APO 02.
And the upper here, Business Requirements and Expectations. Look at this. It's listed as an input to practically every single other management objective across APO, BAI, DSS, and MEA.
Yes. That input flow is another one of those absolutely critical connections in the framework. It underscores that if you don't effectively capture and manage business requirements right here in APO 08,
then everything else you plan, build, run, and monitor downstream is at high risk of being misaligned or simply not meeting the need.
Precisely. This objective is the main conduit for ensuring INT effort actually goes where the business needs it most.
Okay, that's a huge point. Then APO 8.02, align INT strategy with business expectations and identify opportunities for IT to enhance the business. This sounds more proactive.
It is. It's not just about passively taking orders. It's about actively looking for ways INT can add value, enhance performance, maybe identify new tech opportunities, making IT that value-add partner.
The metrics reflect that the inclusion rate of technology opportunities in investment proposals.
Right.
It's meant to lead to actual investments.
And the output is business cases for INT initiatives, which feeds directly into APO 05 portfolio management.
Closing the loop. Understanding business needs and seeing opportunities directly informs which programs get funded.
Exactly. Then APO 8.04, Manage Business Communication, covers the practicalities, planning comms, getting feedback, taking ownership during major events, providing support. Inputs like risk impact communication from APO 12 and planned downtime notices from BAO 9 show how specific events drive communication needs managed here. And APO 05 provide input to the continual improvement of services. This takes inputs like quality monitoring results from APO 11 and improvement plans coming out of BAI and outputs definition of potential improvement projects back into BAI. So relationship management is also a channel for feeding improvement ideas back into the delivery cycle. Correct. The components for APO 8 highlight the business relationship manager, BRM, role as key, and emphasize a culture of collaboration, openness, and trust. Fostering the right environment is crucial.
Okay, following the relationships, we get APO 9, Managed Service Agreements, formalizing those expectations.
That's a great way to put it. The purpose is managing IT services to make sure those agreed upon service levels are actually met. Supports goals like quality of service, EG01, and customer satisfaction, EG05.
APO 09.01, defined service agreements, looks like the core practice.
It is. Analyzing requirements for new or changed services, translating those business requirements you got from APO 8.01 into specific service level requirements, SLRs.
SLRs covering things like availability, performance, capacity, security, compliance.
And ensuring they include both minimum acceptable levels and target levels. Prioritizing which services need formal agreements based on business criticality.
The metrics focus on coverage like % of live IT services covered by service agreements. And the outputs are the SLRs and the actual service level agreements, SLAs, feeding into solutions identification in BAI 03.
Then APO 0.04 is monitor and report service levels, watching performance against the agreements, reporting on achievements, spotting trends, providing info for performance management.
Inputs for this come from quality monitoring, APO 11, root cause analysis of failures, APO 11, and incident request reports from operations, DSS 02.
Right. And the monitoring output improvement action plans feeds back into APO 08 relationships and various BAI objectives. This shows how performance against SLAs drives real conversations and improvement initiatives.
And APO 9.05, review service agreements and contracts, takes inputs like quality results and customer feedback from APO 11 to actually update the SLAs. It's the feedback loop to keep agreements current.
Exactly. And the related guidance mentions ISO IE 2000 and ITIL standard stuff for service management.
Okay, next, APO 10, managed suppliers, extending relationship management outwards.
Perfect analogy. This is about managing those third-party services, outsourcing, cloud providers, you name it, ensuring they deliver the needed value and performance while managing risk and compliance. Supports similar goals around service quality and satisfaction.
APO 10.01, establish and maintain supplier relationships, setting up those partnerships.
Yeah. Scanning for new partners, setting criteria for how important or critical vendors are, defining how you'll manage different types of vendors, clarifying roles for managing them, defining evaluation criteria.
The metrics look at how well suppliers meet those criteria. Inputs include the INT strategy, APO 02, and business requirements, APO 8. And it outputs a vendor catalog for use in BAI.
Then APO 10.02, select vendors. This is the formal procurement part. Selecting suppliers fairly, ensuring they're the best fit, maybe even optimizing requirements based on what potential suppliers can offer. Metrics look at gaps between what's offered and what was asked for in the RFP.
Inputs include investment return expectations from APO 05 and acceptance criteria from APO 11, linking supplier selection to value goals and quality standards.
Definitely. APO 10.03 is manage vendor contracts, the formal agreements, assigning owners, specifying communication processes, managing renewals, ensuring contracts meet legal and regulatory needs. Metrics track things like having control requirements in contracts and handling disputes.
And finally, APO 10.04, monitor and evaluate vendor performance.
Right. Defining monitoring processes, checking performance against contracts and SLAs, input from APO 09, assessing vendor risk security, financial, continuity, compliance, reputation, doing periodic reviews, escalating problems, managing invoices against contracts.
This monitoring seems crucial. The outputs include vendor assessment reports feeding back into relationship management.
And, very importantly, identified vendor delivery risk and results of third-party risk assessments.
And those feed into APO 12, managed risk, and even up to governance, EDM 03.
Yes, that connection is key. It shows supplier management isn't just about getting a service delivered. It's a direct input into the organization's overall risk management process. Vendor risk is enterprise risk. The culture component mentions management setting the tone for ethical vendor management.
Got it. Okay, next is APO 11, managed quality. This feels like it underpins a lot of the other objectives.
It really does. The aim is ensuring quality across all INT activities and services. Purpose, establishing and maintaining a quality management system, QMS, for INT. Supports goals like quality of product services, EG01, and customer satisfaction, EG05.
APO 11.01, establish a quality management system, QMS, building the structure for quality.
That's it, making sure the overall INT framework includes a standard, formal, continuous approach to quality aligned with the enterprise's own QMS. Identifying quality requirements from customers or regulations. Defining quality roles and responsibilities that output feeds back into APOs 01 and DSS 06.
Again, showing how these foundational pieces connect. Quality roles link to overall roles. Quality management plans feed into data management, APO 14, and project build plans in BAI.
Correct. Then APO 11.02, manage quality standards, practices, and procedures, and integrate quality management into key processes and solutions. This is about embedding quality into the actual work.
Defining standards, making sure quality requirements are in development processes, in acquisition processes, and contracts with suppliers, feeding APO 10.
Then integrating standards into operational processes like the service desk or problem management.
And then the outputs here, quality management standards, feeding all other management objectives. That's huge.
It really emphasizes quality as a pervasive concern. And acceptance criteria, another output, feeds into BAI, build, and APO 10 suppliers, ensuring quality targets are clear from the start.
APO 11.04 is perform quality monitoring, control, and reviews, checking how things are going. Inputs from build quality assurance, BAI 03, and operational reports, DSSO 2.
And its outputs are critical feedback loops. Results of quality monitoring and results of quality reviews and audits feed back into relationships, APO 08, service agreements, APO 09, and change acceptance, DAI 07.
And root causes of quality delivery failures feeding back into those same areas, plus monitoring and evaluation in MEA.
Yes, that feedback loop is vital. Identifying quality problems directly drives conversations with the business, updates to SLAs, and improvements in how solutions are built and run.
And APO 11.05, maintain continuous improvement, shares good practices across the board. Related guidance mentions PMBOK.
Right. Now for APO 12, managed risk, always a critical topic.
Absolutely. Integrating INT risk management into the broader enterprise risk management framework. Supports AGO 3, managed risk, and AGO 2, managed INT-related risk.
First step, APO 12.01. Understand the context, scope, and boundaries of INT risk, setting the stage.
Defining the context based on enterprise strategy, APO 02 and ERM. Identifying stakeholders, understanding external threats.
And outputting the scope of risk analysis efforts.
Then APO 12.02, analyze risk. Identifying and assessing specific risks.
Building those INT risk scenarios, including potential losses, reputation hits, identifying risk factors like threats, vulnerabilities, assets, assessing probability and impact, looking at existing controls, and figuring out the residual risk.
Inputs include business impact analyses from continuity, DSSO 4, threat evaluations from security, DSSO 5, external threat advisories.
And the output, the risk analysis result, is a critical input for designing the management system back in APO 01, refining strategy in APO 02, and feeding up to governance decisions in EDMs 03. KIOSO ERM is mentioned as related guidance.
APO 12.03, maintain a risk profile, collecting all the identified risks and linking them to the business.
Exactly. Inventorying business processes, mapping their dependencies on INT services and infrastructure, identifying key supporting components, people, apps, vendors, figuring out what's essential, analyzing those dependencies for weak links.
Inputs include vendor risk from APO 10, threat evaluations from DSSO 5, and crucially, risk appetite and tolerance guidance coming down from governance, EDM 03.
And the output, the aggregated risk profile, feeds back into strategy refinement, APO 02, and governance oversight, EDM 03.
APO 12.04, articulate risk. This is purely about communication.
Pretty much. Reporting risk effectively to stakeholders, defining communication principles, formats, channels, getting stakeholders sign-off on reporting.
Metrics focus on reporting frequency to the board and business management's awareness of INT risk. Inputs are the analysis, results, and profile, plus third-party risk assessments from APO 10 and elsewhere.
And the output, risk analysis and risk profile reports for stakeholders, feeds back into supplier management, APO 10, governance, EDM, and monitoring, MEA, showing how risk reporting informs those areas.
Then APO 12.05, define a risk management action portfolio, outputs project proposals for reducing risk, which feeds into strategy, APO 02, and security, APO 13. So risk analysis directly drives initiatives.
Yep. And APO 12.06, respond to risk, takes remedial actions from governance and root causes from operations as input.
And outputs risk impact communication, feeding back into the management system, APO 1, and relationship management, APO 8. So dealing with risk events requires clear communication.
The culture component for APO 12 is really detailed, emphasizing transparency, participation, senior management support, business ownership, aligning policies to risk appetite, and proactive monitoring. Lots of references to COSO, ISF, NIST2.
Go ahead, nearly there. APO 13, managed security, another huge pervasive topic.
Couldn't be more critical. Purpose: ensuring security of information and infrastructure. Supports goals around risk, e.g. ODO3, AG02, information quality, EG07, compliance, EG11, AG01, AG11, and security privacy itself, AG07.
APO 13.01, establish and maintain an information security management system, ISMS.
Defining the ISMS scope, establishing the security policy aligned with strategy, APO02. Defining roles, feeding APO01, DSS06, defining core ISMS processes like asset management, risk assessment, incident management, vulnerability management, awareness training, monitoring.
Metrics look at ISMS scope coverage and training frequency. Input is the overall enterprise security approach.
Then APO 13.02, define and manage an information security and privacy risk treatment plan. This is where you decide how to handle identified security risks.
Maintaining the plan, aligning it with strategy and architecture, APO03, ensuring improvement recommendations have business cases, APO05, implementing improvements.
Inputs include strategic capability gaps from APO0 and risk reduction proposals from APO12. Shows security treatment is informed by strategy and overall risk assessment.
And the output, Information Security Risk Treatment Plan. Look at this. It's listed as feeding all APO, BAI, DSS, MEA, and EDM objectives.
That is incredibly significant. It means the plan for how you treat security risks directly influences planning, building, running, monitoring, and governance decisions right across the enterprise. Security isn't bolted on. Its risk treatment approach is fundamental to how INT operates. NIST SP 837 is referenced.
Wow, okay. And APO 13.03, monitor and review the Information Security Management System, ISMS. Oversight, audits, management reviews of effectiveness.
Exactly. The components include a RACI matrix showing shared responsibility across roles like CEO, CIO, security manager, privacy officer, ISO 2702 is mentioned.
And finally, the last one in APO 14, manage data. Increasingly critical.
Absolutely. Data is a core enterprise asset. The purpose is managing data across its lifecycle, ensuring alignment with enterprise strategy. Supports goals like info quality, EG07, AG10, process optimization, EG08, compliance, EG11, AG11.
APO 14.01, define a data management strategy, is the starting point.
Defining the strategy aligned with the main enterprise strategy, APO02. Considering classification and handling needs, CIA. Defining data governance structures and roles. Defining approaches for data modeling, quality, archiving, backup, security. Addressing legal regulatory needs. Input comes from information ownership defined back in APO01.
And the output, data management strategy, again, look, listed as an input to almost every other management objective in APO, BAI, and DSS.
Yes. This has similar weight to the INT strategy output from APO02. It signals that data management isn't siloed. Its strategy dictates how data is handled everywhere, planning, building, running services. If your data strategy is weak or missing, it impacts everything.
Makes sense. Then APO 14.02, manage a business glossary for common terms. APO 14.03, establish the processes and infrastructure for metadata management, data about data.
And the output of APO 14.03, the information architecture model and metadata documentation, feeds directly into APO03 enterprise architecture, showing that link between data definition and the overall blueprint. CMMI DMM is referenced.
APO 14.04, define a data quality strategy. Because data is only good if it's reliable.
Precisely. Defining the strategy policies, processes, roles, metrics, targets, inputs include data integrity guidelines from APO1 and quality plans from APO11.
Then APO 14.06, ensure a data quality assessment approach is how you measure it. Doing assessments, using thresholds, making remediation recommendations.
APO 14.07, define the data cleansing approach, is about fixing bad data based on business rules. Its output, data quality requirements, feeds into APO9 service agreements, showing how data quality affects service delivery.
And then APO 14.09 on archiving retention and APO 14.10 on backup restore cover the lifecycle needs. APO 14.10 outputs backup plans to DSS04, manage continuity.
Right. Components mention specific SFIA data skills and the importance of a privacy policy linking data management to compliance.
Ooh. Okay, so walking through all 14 APO objectives, you really get a feel for how they build that strategic and planning foundation for INT. It's definitely not just a random list. It's a deeply interconnected system.
And pulling those input-output connections together really drives that home, doesn't it? Think again about that INT strategy from APO 02.05 feeding into almost everything.
Yeah, it really highlights that if your strategy process itself isn't working well,
the negative effects ripple out everywhere. Portfolio choices, resource plans, security, data strategy, how you build things, how you run things, how you monitor things. it all gets impacted.
And same for the business requirements, from APO 808.01 feeding everywhere. If you misunderstand the need up front,
No amount of perfect execution later can fix that fundamental misalignment. It really elevates the importance of that relationship management piece.
and seeing how risk, APO 12, and security, APO 13, aren't separate silos either. Risk analysis feeding strategy, vendor risk feeding overall risk proposals feeding security plans.
And that security risk treatment plan from APO 13 influencing activities across all domains. It shows risk and security thinking has to be woven throughout, not just added on later.
And the data management strategy from APO 14 having that same broad impact across APO, BAI, DSS. As data gets more central, having a clear strategy for it is just foundational.
Absolutely. COBIT clearly positions this align, plan, and organize domain as where critical decisions are made and outputs are generated that have really far-reaching consequences for the whole INT function and its ability to actually support the enterprise effectively.
It's all about getting the direction right, the resources lined up, and those foundational structures, architecture, quality, risk, security, data properly planned before you pour resources into building and running.
So what does this deep dive into your source material, focusing on the APO domain, really mean for you, the listener?
Well, hopefully understanding this structure helps you make sense of the inherent complexity in INT management and governance.
Right. It provides that logical framework, that map, for seeing how all these different activities from high-level strategy right down to managing data backups are intended to connect and work together as an integrated system.
You've hopefully moved beyond just reading the definitions to seeing the underlying logic, those crucial input-output connections, and the flow of information that ties this whole planning domain to everything else INT does.
And maybe it helps you spot potential gaps or weaknesses in your own context, or understand why you might be facing certain challenges, perhaps because a key preceding APO objective isn't quite hitting the mark.
This has been our deep dive into the Align, Plan, and Organize domain of COBIT 2019, drawing straight from Chapter 4 of the framework document you shared. We've walked through APO 11 to APO 14.
Hitting the purpose, key practices, supporting components, and really trying to emphasize those vital input-output relationships that show the interconnectedness.
And as we saw again and again, the source material hammers home that alignment aspect of Align, Plan, and Organize, aligning INT strategy with business strategy,
Aligning human resources with business needs,
aligning suppliers with strategy and value.
aligning data management with objectives. It's everywhere.
Which brings up a final thought, maybe something for you to mull over. While the framework gives us all these detailed practices and metrics for achieving alignment, how does that alignment truly get felt and sustained in the day-to-day culture and operations, beyond the checklists and reports?
That's a great question. What does successful alignment actually feel like when it's working well between teams, between IT and the business?
And maybe more importantly, what are the subtle, maybe cultural or behavioral, early warning signs that alignment might be starting to drift, even if the official metrics still look okay on the surface?
That ongoing challenge embedding alignment, not just in process, but in culture and feel, seems like a really rich area for more thinking and exploration within your own specific organizational context.